The transfer portal has gone crazy over the last couple of months, and 2025 has been like any other year for transferring. With that being said, there are a couple of quarterbacks who at one point were seen as the next big thing or showed significant promise earlier on in their college careers. Now, as time has passed by, some of them have careers that are currently on life support. In today's video, I'm going to go through 10 examples of quarterback transfers whose careers currently really need to get going and are potentially on their last chance. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about some transfer quarterbacks on life support. Okay, so the first guy I want to talk about is Jaylen Henderson. He's currently listed as the number 53 quarterback in the 2025 transfer portal, and coming out of Chaminade High School in California, he was a 3-star recruit. Henderson first ended up playing at Fresno State, where he played in 5 games before he ended up going to Texas A&M. He was seen as a guy who had some future, or was definitely a depth piece for the Aggies, but unfortunately Henderson was never really able to get going while he was in an A&M uniform, and he ended up having 715 yards and 6 touchdowns. This past season, Henderson did not see the field at all, and then now as we're going into 2025, he has since transferred to West Virginia. The Mountaineers are losing Garrett Green, and they desperately need a new quarterback there, so Henderson's career is currently on life support, and this is his last chance to make it work as a starting Power 4 quarterback. Just a few years ago, Tyler Van Dyke was seen as a first-round quarterback. After a breakout season at Miami, Van Dyke was getting a ton of NFL attention, and this built upon his great career coming out of Connecticut, as he was a 4-star recruit when he went to Suffield Academy. He was one of the top quarterbacks in the country and ended up going to Miami, where he would eventually take over at the back half of the 2021 season, where he had nearly 3,000 yards and 25 touchdowns. Unfortunately, 2022 was a disaster and his draft stock crashed, and he got a little bit better in 2023 by throwing for 2,700 yards, but he would transfer to Wisconsin for 2024, and for some reason that was seen as a better fit, but it's because they had Cam Ward coming in at Miami. While he's at Wisconsin, he ended up throwing for 422 yards and 1 touchdown before he would get hurt. Van Dyke has since transferred to SMU, which sort of to me seems like he's waving the white flag, as they already have Kevin Jennings on the roster. The other backup, Preston Stone, left for Northwestern, so I'm not sure why Van Dyke is going to SMU for any other reason other than just being an insurance policy. The other way though, Van Dyke's career is currently on life support, and things have fallen off for the former first-round hopeful. A couple days ago in my video about Florida State's quarterback room, I said to be weary of quarterbacks who quit on the team halfway through the year. That's what Castellanos did at Boston College last year, and 2 years ago MJ Morris would do that. Coming out of Carrollton High School in Georgia, MJ Morris was a 4-star recruit after throwing for over 3,000 yards and 33 touchdowns. He became one of the highest ranked quarterbacks to ever sign with NC State, and Morris would eventually take over for a good chunk of that 2023 season, throwing for about 719 yards and 7 touchdowns. He showed plenty of promise and potential, but in order to save a year of eligibility, he bailed on the team at the end of the year. He thought he'd get a ton of high major offers, but instead he ended up at Maryland and lost the job to Billy Edwards Jr. Morris didn't do anything last year and has since transferred now for the second time, where he'll head over to Coastal Carolina. I'm not sure what Coastal Carolina's quarterback room looks like, as I think they've brought in a couple of former Power 4 quarterbacks. MJ Morris's career is on life support, and about 18 months ago, he was at the top of the world at NC State, and now he's barely hanging on. I still remember a few years ago when I first started doing YouTube and talked about Gavin Whimsat making his commitment to Rutgers. Whimsat came out of Owensboro High School in Kentucky, and at one point was a top 10 quarterback in his high school class, but he would decide to reclassify and chose Rutgers over Kentucky. He ended up spurning the hometown Wildcats, and while Whimsat played a little bit at the end of 2021, he'd start in both 2022 and 2023, and while Rutgers was improving in 2023, Whimsat was not able to put it all together. He would then transfer to Kentucky for the 2024 season, and he was stuck behind Brock Vandegrift. Whenever Whimsat got an opportunity, he didn't look that great, and he threw for more interceptions than touchdowns. Whimsat will now be on his 3rd school in 3 years, as he's transferring to Jacksonville State. He's going down to the bottom of FBS football to try to make things work, and I assume he'll probably start for the Gamecocks, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Gavin Whimsat at one point was a huge name, and I guess this is what happens when you pick the wrong school to go to. I'm not sure why he ever went to Rutgers to begin with, and now his career is on life support. Another guy who is really running out of time is AJ Swan. Coming out of Cherokee High School in the state of Georgia, AJ Swan blew up into a 4-star recruit. Originally, he was a Maryland commit, but he would later flip to play at Vanderbilt. Sensing an opportunity to start and play in the SEC, Swan was motivated to go down to Nashville, and eventually he got an opportunity. After Mike Wright and Ken Seals didn't work out, Swan showed plenty of glimpse in his 2 seasons there, throwing for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2022, and 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2023. Unfortunately, he would decide to try to move up a little bit on the ladder, and Vanderbilt brought in Diego Pavia, so I guess it didn't matter, but Swan ended up at LSU to try to battle it out with Garrett Nussmeier. Ultimately, Swan lost the job and was the backup quarterback for the Tigers, and this past season had 10 total yards of offense. Originally, they were going to bring in Bryce Underwood, but then LSU ended up getting Michael Van Buren to pair alongside Colin Hurley, so Swan knew he wasn't going to play because Nussmeier was back again. Swan has now decided he'll transfer over to Appalachian State, where he'll compete with another former big-time quarterback in J.J. Cole for that starting job, and they'll try to replace Joey Aguilar, who went from UCLA to Tennessee, in that whole Nico situation. Either way, Swan's career is currently on life support, and while he wasn't necessarily a Hall of Fame player, he was showing a lot of potential, and his career was definitely on the up and up just a little bit ago. One of the strangest cases currently in college football is that of Malachi Nelson. Coming out of Los Alamitos High School in California, Malachi was seen as a prodigy-like quarterback, and for quite some time was listed as the #1 quarterback in the country. Nelson was all over everything, and eventually committed to Oklahoma. But when Lincoln Riley would go to USC, he would decide to follow him there. He became one of the best players in all of high school football, and was seen as a successor to Caleb Williams. Unfortunately, that would never end up working out for Malachi, as in 2023, he completed 1 pass. Miller Moss and Jaden Mayava ended up becoming the guys for USC in 2024, and Nelson went to Boise State, where he thought he could win the job. Unfortunately, he would lose the job, but he did get to enjoy the success that Boise State had as they made the playoff, and Ashton Genty almost won the Heisman. Nelson will now be looking for his 3rd school in 3 years, and he found it by going down to South Texas, as he'll play for UTEP, or the University of Texas at El Paso. If he doesn't win that starting job, and for a guy who was once seen as a 3 years and go off to the NFL type player, he's now on his 3rd school and is playing at the bottom of FBS football, and his career is on life support. Another guy who has not been able to figure things out is Robbie Ashford. Robbie Ashford was at one point a 4-star recruit coming out of Hoover High School in Alabama, and would originally decide to go to Oregon. He's sort of been all over the place, as he spent just 1 season with the Oregon Ducks before he would then transfer to Auburn. In 2022, he actually played the back half of the season, throwing for 1,600 yards and 7 touchdowns, but he struggled mightily with interceptions. He was once again back in 2023, but he would lose the starting job and then would decide to transfer. This would now be his 2nd transfer, and he'd end up at South Carolina. He lost the job to Lenora Sellers, and in mop-up duty threw for about 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. While Robbie Ashford is a really good athlete, he's not been able to put it all together as a quarterback, and he will now be on his 4th different school, and he will be at Wake Forest. I'm shocked that Power 4 teams keep giving him an opportunity, but at this point, he'll be battling it out with Deshaun Purdy for that starting job, and for a guy who's been at 2 SEC programs and one of the top schools in the country in Oregon, he's not been able to figure things out, and things seem to be getting worse and worse for him. Speaking of 5 stars who can't figure it out, Sam Huard is another name. Coming out of Bellevue High School in Washington, he was the son of a former Washington quarterback, so when he ended up with the Huskies, it was not a shocker, but the fact that he was a 5-star sort of was. Huard is one of the forgotten names in that 2022 high school class, and he ended up not doing anything while he was at Washington. In total, he had 1 touchdown compared to 4 interceptions, and he was badly mismanaged while he was there. After the 2022 season, he would transfer to Cal Poly, where he threw for 2,200 yards and 18 touchdowns. Alright, he saved his career at the FCS level, but then he headed over to Utah. Things would not end up working out for them there, and despite being in a terrible spot with the quarterback position due to injuries, I don't believe Huard ever got on the field last year. He has since decided to transfer to USC for his 4th school in 5 years, and obviously he's not going to start, but I guess he'll be a good depth piece, will provide leadership in the locker room, and maybe, if worse comes to worse, he'll get on the field for garbage time. I have no clue, but this is Sam Huard's last chance, and I hope he figures it out. If there's one guy who has a potential really good story, it's going to be Walker Howard here. Coming out of Lafayette, Louisiana, Walker Howard was the son of a former LSU quarterback, and after putting up big-time numbers at St. Thomas More High School, he would commit to go to LSU. It would depend on the site if he was a 4 or a 5-star, but he arrived at LSU and ultimately sort of got screwed because Jaden Daniels was there. He passed for 7 yards. He would transfer to Ole Miss for the 2023 and 2024 season, and in total in 2 years, he passed for 56 yards. It was clear Lane Kiffin was moving ahead with Austin Simmons, so he decided to transfer once again for the 2025 season, and made a good choice. He went back home, as he'll now be the starting quarterback for his hometown college, the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. I really hope he gets to be the starter there and ends up putting up huge numbers, because it'd be kind of cool to see the former 5-star go back home and help elevate that program, which is already one of the top group of 5 schools. Last but not least, we get to talk about Jaden Rashada. He's been sort of all over the place the last few years, as he was originally at Liberty High School in California, but then would transfer to IMG and ended up at Pittsburgh High School. He was at 3 different high schools, and then ended up committing to 3 different schools. He spent time fuddling around between Miami and Florida, and then ended up at Arizona State after those NIL deals fell through. Rashada started the season but ended up getting hurt, and then we decided to transfer to Georgia for the 2024 campaign. He was always seen as a depth piece and never stepped foot on the field, which is why he decided to enter the portal again in 2025, and has since found his home at Sacramento State. Yeah, there was no FBS team that wanted Rashada despite nearly being a 5-star recruit, and now he'll be at Sacramento State, who I guess had the money to pay him and are trying to find their way up to the FBS. Who knows how he's going to do, but I definitely want to see Rashada ball out at Sacramento State, and this is definitely an interesting story to watch, but for now, Rashada's career is on life support. So yeah, I ended up saying the phrase life support a lot in today's video, but that was sort of the goal here. But what do you guys think? How do you think any of these quarterbacks will do? Should I make a part 2? And what other video topics should I do next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.